as a whole. Though, of course, you should also know that breast cancer can occur in men, but the incidence is much less. So, yeah, in urban India,
Right.
the leading malignancy amongst women is breast, ovary, endometrium, and cervix.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, what exactly? Which are the cancers that we are particularly going to touch upon today? If you can just, you know,
Yeah. So since
list them down for the audience.
since breast and ovary are very common in clinical practice, of course, endometrium as well. I think we should touch upon these three, if not all four altogether.
Right, right. And so my next question there would be breast and endometrial cancers. Which is the age group amongst women which is most prone to it and should definitely watch out for signs?
Yeah. So traditionally, if we go by the Western data and the statistics which are available to us, uh, we would see all these malignancies in a post-menopausal woman. I mean, this was the conventional
Okay.
thinking, let's say 20, 30 years back. So a case of a lump in the breast in a post-menopausal woman would be considered as a cancer unless proven otherwise. That was sort of the dictum. But
Right.
now coming as things have evolved and things have changed over the last many decades, whether it's in terms of lifestyle or change in diet or whatever it is, or even the way things are going, as you can see with the advent of so-called modernization or urbanization or whatever it is, we are seeing malignancies a decade earlier.
Right.
So it's definitely happening much earlier as compared to before. So it's not just necessarily in postmenopausal women. Yes, we any lump in the breast is
Hmm.
is a sign to watch out for. Uh,
Right.
Second thing is discharge from the breast. That is the nipple discharge.
Right.
So that itself is also one of the signs of something you should watch out for. Then, if there are any skin changes, if there's a ulcer on the skin, if there's a crack somewhere, you know, and
Right.
again coming to the age group for endometrial cancer, usually post menopausal women with bleeding have to there's an alert, like it's a red alert. So, and in the pre-menopausal age group, there's a lot of menorrhagia or heavy bleeding during periods. You're not able to
Right.
attribute it to a cause. So unless
Right.
it gets thoroughly evaluated, uh, these are the age groups in which you commonly see a breast or a endometrial cancer.
Okay, okay. So, I mean, how about since we're talking about endometrial cancer, and there have been theories about PCOS being related to endometrial cancer, is there a direct link that we can see there?
Yeah, see, these are all attributable risk factors. Okay. Yeah.
Dr. Vishnu, I think we're losing you there. There's some
With the voice or with the video?
with the voice also. The video
Okay.
is definitely shut. We
Okay.
lost you with the voice also.
Okay. So, am I? Hello.
Yeah, you're audible now.
Yeah. So, the thing with endometrial factor malignancies is it's just not a one thing. It's not just one factor which will play a role in developing a malignancy. It
Right.
is attributable to multiple factors. With PCOS, there may be an attributable risk as opposed to other malignancies because it's all mediated through your hormones. So when
Hmm.
there's a hormonal change, the lining of the endometrium, that is the lining of the uterus, which is the endometrium, gets affected.
Right.
So that's how it plays a role in probable development of malignancy.
Right. So there has been I mean, a slightly higher risk amongst women with PCOS
Yeah, that's
that,
yeah. So like I
they
said,
might get diagnosed.
yeah. So there's something called estrogen, which comes out of the ovaries. So these act on the endometrium, and the thickness of the endometrium sort of increases. So there is a increased incidence of endometrial hyperplasia, what we call,
Okay.
which over a period of time might lead to malignancy.
Okay. Okay. If you could just explain that a little in maybe layman's terms. so we could understand that better.
Uh, so what happens when the PCOS or PCOD is a polycystic ovarian disease or polycystic ovarian syndrome, like what most people call it today. So they have either it's a some sort of an extreme. It's either infrequent periods or prolonged menstrual periods, you know,
Right.
or there could be some sort of mm, what we call as androgenization. That is some sort of change in the voice or a lot of acne, because
Right.
the androgen receptors are also kind of getting activated here. So
Hmm.
when there's so much of hormonal interplay, which is uh, causing haywire in your system,
Right.
automatically that is affecting the lining of the endometrium as well. So uh, this can sort of lead to a possible uh, increase in the risk. I wouldn't attribute it directly to causing it. It would probably attribute it to calling it to an increase in the risk of
Right.
development of endometrial malignancy.
Understood.
Also,
And
this sorry, also
no,
this
please go ahead.
yeah. So there's some sort of what we call as a uh, syndrome X, metabolic syndrome, is a severe change in the insulin levels in these patients. So
Right.
all these add up. It's not one factor alone. There's a big interplay of multiple factors.
All those factors. Understood. So, what are the first? I mean, if we talk about the first signs, let's talk about breast cancer first, maybe. So, like you mentioned, watching out for lumps or, changes in your skin. So, when does it reach? I mean, when is it the right point to take it seriously and go for a screening or to go visit a doctor?
So first of all, as women, we should encourage everyone to have a clinical breast examination. A
Right.
self breast examination at least every month would be ideal. Uh,
Okay.
After the fourth or fifth day after the period stops. So that's when the breasts are less tender and less heavy, and it's easier to pick up a lump
Right.
which can be palpated. So there are enough and many what we call as educational videos or guidelines and illustrations which teach uh, which teach a lady how to self-examine her breast. So
Okay.
that's the first step. So not only examine your breast, you examine the area under your armpit, which we technically call as the axilla.
Okay.
So you examine this entire area thoroughly, and if you pick up any lump or any bump which is
Mhm.
uneven, irregular, or if you've noticed it before and it has sort of increased in size and you've sort of neglected it, or if you feel there's some change in the way there's a nipple discharge and like, some bloody nipple discharge, it's not
Right.
stopping. I mean, these are all signs that you should not ignore, something which you should go in immediately. This is where
Okay.
the clinical part ends. And if you are
Okay.
having perfectly normal breast on a clinical breast examination, still we would advise a annual mammogram over the age of 40 years. That is the conventional way of doing it.
Doctor, I lost you there. There was your voice was breaking a little there. You're talking about the clinical and then the examinations that need to be done.
Okay.
Can you
Uh,
repeat that?
yeah. So if you're after the clinical examination, if you still feel the breasts are still normal and everything, you should not forget to do an annual mammogram, provided uh, I mean, it complements the clinical breast examination. Annual breast mammogram over the age of 40 years is recommended amongst all women across across all countries.
Okay, okay. So like you said, annual mammogram is the first thing that needs to be done once you've done your self-examination or your clinical examination. What sort of, what are the specialized hospitals or clinics that one could visit, and what are the financial, I mean, financially, how much would it cost? Because that again is a hindrance in India, when it comes to healthcare, your
So,
finances definitely prove to be a hindrance.
yeah. So surprisingly, if you look at healthcare across the world, uh, am I audible? Yeah. I think I can't hear you.
You're audible. You're audible.
Okay. So surprisingly, when we talk of healthcare across the world, and when we compare it to India, actually India is the cheapest place for healthcare. The rest of the world is very, very expensive. But unfortunately, because of the socio-economic situation, and people generally would in India, they, they take health for granted as opposed to people in the West. So people tend to ignore things, be a little more casual. But with day and age, with the awareness, with the increasing trend to access good quality healthcare, which is available in most places right now, as opposed to what it was maybe 40, 45 years back, when you probably had to travel to only a metro to get a CT scan done. No, I mean, those days there was no CT scan, or even to see a good doctor. So, but currently that is not the scenario. Like, probable every probable town has a diagnostic facility where you can get these basic investigations done. A mammogram can be done. It can be, if you have problem interpreting it, the images can be sent across.
Right.
Connectivity is so good. You can get another opinion in another city. You need not,
Hmm.
and the costs are not that high for imaging and, getting your basic annual health checkups.
Okay. So what would the range be anyway if we had to, put a number to it?
Probably in a few thousands of rupees. It
Okay.
can be done along with, you can get your mammogram, even the ultrasound of the breast, all
Right.
of this combined together along with your routine. Generally the patient wouldn't get just one test. They probably get even their routine blood test, maybe even a chest x-ray, probably ECG as well. I mean, all this will get covered in a few thousand.
Right. Right. Understood. That was just one request. If you could be a little louder, we are not able to hear you very clearly.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah, this is better.
Yeah,
This is
I'm
better.
so sorry. I'm just talking to you out of the hospital complex itself. So I've just managed to gather up a system and and a mic and
No problem. And we're really glad you managed to. That's really nice of you. Thank you. Yes. So coming back to breast cancer, like you mentioned, there are certain steps, that you go through. You self-examine, you go through some clinical examinations. But if somebody doesn't have any symptoms, is it still advisable to go for certain screening procedures after a certain age, even when
yeah,
there are no obvious symptoms?
yeah. So the whole idea of screening is to pick up something which is not there.
Okay.
The
Okay.
whole idea of a screening mammogram is to pick up ideally a non-palpable disease.
Right.
So we want to pick up the disease in a very, very early stage so that we can
Right.
actually offer cure.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of debate worldwide. I mean, these guidelines keep changing every 5 years or 10 years.
Right.
But in a country like India, I think screening is the way to go forward, because the kind of disease you see when things go advanced, it's pathetic. It's very sad. I mean, you don't want to be in that situation, in that place.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I mean, you have to forget that. Uh, you have to accept the fact. You have to forget that probable thing that there could be something underlying. Go ahead with the process. Get
Hmm.
yourself thoroughly checked. Meet a good clinician or a expert in the field, and
Right.
come up with a diagnosis at least.
Right, right. So, what about, I mean, yes, what is the age post which you should just compulsorily go for it even
Yeah.
when there are no
So
symptoms?
in a person who doesn't have any family risk, 40 years is the age.
40 years. Okay. So, when you say there are no family risk, that means that heredity also plays a role here?
It plays a very big role.
Okay.
So if especially if there's a what we call as a direct immediate family, like the mother,
Right.
grandmother, or the mother's sister, the aunts. So these are the people whom we call as the immediate, uh, what we call the first circle. So
Hmm.
first line of relatives. So
Hmm.
in such a scenario, it is very difficult to say when an offspring would develop cancer. So we start screening as early as 35 years of age. Sometimes
Okay.
when there are the hereditary family syndromes associated, we start even earlier. So we
Okay.
start advising them to get. In fact, the American College of Surgeons, in fact, suggests even 30 years of age for an annual MRI for
Okay.
somebody who has a risk of hereditary breast cancer. And
Right.
of course, you would have read about the Angelina Jolie effect and all of that with the BRCA1, BRCA2 mutations. These are the genes which are predisposed to development of breast cancer.
Right. So
So
we're not really aware of these terms that you just
yeah,
mentioned. So if you,
sorry, I got a little technical there. So
yeah.
I'm sure you would have read about Angelina Jolie getting a double mastectomy and prophylactic oophorectomy done.
Yes, yes.
Some few years back, it was a big thing in all the media and everywhere. So
Right.
so yeah, I mean that sort of created more awareness, but it did have an offshoot into a different tangent as well. So so what happens is when there is a strong family history, to put it in simple terms. So like the grandmother, the mother, then the next generation of daughters. So they're all at a very high risk of breast cancer. So we do these genetic tests to see if their incidence of breast cancer is high. I mean, if they have this gene, like what I mentioned, what we call as the BRCA1 and the BRCA2, BRCA1 and BRCA2, their incidence of developing breast cancer goes up manifold. Though
Okay.
the percentage of these women as a whole is low, as in it could be anywhere between 8 to 10%. But having that mutation, you have a 85-90% chance of getting breast and ovarian cancer. So that puts you in the red zone. So you keep yourself getting assessed more
Right.
regularly, more with probable ultrasound as well of the abdomen to see the ovaries, to see what's
Right.
happening, and get your breast MRIs done early. Like we don't do the digital mammograms in younger women because the breasts are more dense, so
Hmm.
we tend to miss out on the imaging. So an MRI of the breast is indicated in younger women.
Right. So when you say, I mean, like you said, the heredity part obviously plays a role. So is it only when somebody's mother or grandmother has had breast cancer that that person is more susceptible to it, or any kind of cancer could mean that, the offspring would probably be suffering from breast cancer or any other cancer?
Yeah. So it's not only just the mother. Like we have to talk about the male factor as well. So if there's a history of pancreatic cancer or prostate cancer in the family, like the father or the grandfather, so again the offsprings have a higher chance of developing a malignancy which is related to this group.
Right.
It need not be the same malignancy like you're saying. I think that was your question, right? So
Yeah, yeah, pretty
it,
much.
it
Yeah.
need not be the exact same thing. It could be something related, something where the hormonal interplays are there. Like we have hereditary breast and ovarian cancer syndrome.
Right.
So maybe one generation had breast, maybe the next
Hmm.
generation would have ovary. Some the next
But
one,
it's
yeah,
it's going to be related to the same sort of group. Like it is going to be these hormone related cancers. My question was if somebody's parent was suffering from say intestinal cancer or blood cancer,
yeah,
is there a chance that the offspring could suffer from something like an endometrial cancer or a breast
yeah.
cancer?
So yeah, that's a very interesting question. Yeah. So the incidence of cancer automatically goes up, but we can't pinpoint and say which one would it be. It's
Right.
like it's very difficult to pinpoint and put a name on it. But yeah, you have to be watching out for those red herrings.
Understood. In fact, what you just mentioned was a very, very good angle that we hadn't really heard of. Like how you mentioned if somebody's father or grandfather had cancers in that group itself, there's a higher chance. We generally always, when we talk about hereditary, we think of the mothers, the grandmothers
Uh,
passing it on,
yeah.
right? So I think that was a really good angle that not many people would be aware of. So is there anything else that you would add to that whole concept?
Yeah. So, I mean, coming out of the hereditary and familial cancer complex as a whole, coming out of it, why I'm saying that, uh, why I'm saying we come out of it is because 80% of cancers are sporadic. So, by sporadic, I mean it's a chance. Most of the cancers happen by a chance mutation within your body at some point in your time. The remaining 20% are familial or hereditary. So they have a chance of happening at an earlier age as opposed to later age in a sporadic. So yeah, in intestinal cancer and breast cancer also there's a relation. There's something called, there are many syndromes like we call the Lynch syndrome, wherein patients have a lot of Lynch also has endometrium mainly.
Right.
Colon and endometrium sort of in that syndrome go together. So these people, because of the mutation in a particular gene,
Hmm.
codes for a particular protein, which kind of goes haywire when it's mutated, and then we end up with this malignancy, unfortunately.
Right.
So
So
Lynch is
basic.
the familial cancer syndrome.
Got it. That I think that's something very like at least I've heard of that for the first time. You know, how your entire family history can lead to you having suffering from cancers later on in your life. So moving on to the next question. I mean, we can probably move on to the whole endometrial cancer concept now. Is there anything else that you would like to add to the whole breast cancer topic? Any advice or
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So like I mean, to put it broadly, uh, please don't ignore any of the signs, you know, and keep a watch on it. Be careful. Uh, there's a question in the chat box. You want to take that now or later?
Yes, I think we could take up the questions later on in the
Got
end.
it.
Just
So
finish.
yeah, so we need to, like I said, keep a good watch. Don't ignore it, even though if you feel that it could be a minor thing. Make sure it's certified by a expert that it's not malignant. Yeah.
Right. Got it. So, moving on to endometrial cancer, we already established that it is one of the most common cancers that women are prone to, and like you said, even PCOS has a link to it. So, my first question would be, what are the first signs that you need to see for endometrial cancer, and your first steps of screening that you should be going for?
So the first sort of sign or symptom would be irregular bleeding. So most
Okay.
commonly, it is attributed to a what we call as a postmenopausal PV bleed.
Right.
So yeah, so some, and if it's happening during in a premenopausal age group, it will be an irregular sort of a feature. So
Hmm.
they'll be put on some medical management. The general trend is to treat it as something which is routine, right? So you try to clear out the non-malignant causes first. Nobody wants
Right.
you jump in and diagnose.
Hmm.
Even though in majority of the cases there may not be cancer at all, it might be
Right.
just benign. So once that sort of you sort of rule that out, then you either if it's still not settling, then probably a gynecologist would advise endometrial curettage or some sampling of the endometrial tissue. So
Hmm.
uh, I mean that's when you actually get to know that there is a malignancy there.
Right.
Yeah. And the second thing, I see a lot of patients who undergo hysterectomies and then come with a diagnosis of cancer.
Hmm.
So I mean they would have gone, they would have got operated thinking it's a benign polyp or something else which is causing this problem. So
Right.
that, once the tissue is sampled and what we call as histopathology, it's cut into fine pieces and examined, and then they come up with a diagnosis of cancer, and then they report back saying, so then the treatment perspective, the staging of the disease, everything changes drastically. So yeah, so PV bleed is one of the most common things. The other things are some sort of vague abdominal symptoms, like you might have bloating, or you might be putting on uh, weight. Yeah, so these are the things which you need to watch out for.
Right. So,
Second, These are
Sorry,
all,
sorry.
yeah. So most of them are non-specific.
Okay. Non-specific as in I didn't get that.
Uh, so non-specific means it can happen otherwise as well.
Okay. It could have multiple causes. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be cancer. Okay, understood. So, and like you mentioned, a lot of people get diagnosed with cancers after getting some sort of surgeries or operations done. So, does that mean that it's not very advisable to go for these procedures?
See, again, it depends on the clinician who's treating the patient. So, by and large, most of the clinicians would have an idea of what the diagnosis is before, offering a particular surgery for a patient. Even
Right.
fibroids can cause some vague PV bleeding and discomfort and all of that. So, yeah,
Right.
uh, but yeah, there is a small chance in some certain group of patients where after the surgery you'll end up with a malignancy. That's not the rule, but yeah, you
Hmm.
have to be aware of it as well.
So basically, it's advisable to go for these procedures, keeping in mind that there is a risk involved of developing further complications later on.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And what about the screening process? What are the tests that are, done for endometrial cancer?
So endometrium is like apart from knowing the endometrial thickness on an ultrasound, uh, probably doing a small sampling of the endometrium. We don't have a routine screening program like we do for cervix, wherein a pap smear is taken. So we wouldn't call it a screening per se, but yeah, a good ultrasound. When you do an ultrasound for many reasons, you get an ultrasound. So having a look at the endometrial thickness helps there. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, yes. So, just like breast cancer, even in case of endometrial cancer, is it advisable that after a certain age, even when you don't have any symptoms, you should just keep a check on your endometrial lining and get your, ultrasound done regularly?
There's unless you have a symptom, nobody would go for an ultrasound per se, or unless
Exactly.
it is part of uh, an ultrasound which is being done for something else.
Right.
So that way, I mean, I wouldn't routinely recommend it, but
Hmm.
yeah, as part of many master health checkups, ultrasounds are being done left, right, and center. So you
Right.
might as well have a look at the endometrial thickness. But there's no standard or routine screening test for endometrial cancer.
Got it. Does going for ultrasound tests too often also harm the body in any way? There is a certain myth that I mean, there's a statement said that too much ultrasound is also not good for the body.
I,
Is that
I,
true?
Actually, it's not with ultrasound.
Okay.
The This concept came out of mammograms actually.
Okay.
So I mean, I don't want to scare anyone, but it's mammograms are safe. But there was some uh, what we call as anything which emits X-rays. You know, the-
Okay.
it has some sort of a small component of radiation. There
Hmm.
is radiation everywhere around us.
Right.
Even a TV tower emits radiation. Even your cell phone towers emit radiation. So there are different aspects of radiation which are there in the environment today.
Right.
Uh, but it's not that all radiation will cause cancer. There has to be a cumulative build-up, or it has to be targeted. Like what happened after the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So there's a rapid increase in malignancy in that area. All sorts of tumors, especially thyroid and leukemias and all sorts of things. So that amount of radiation buildup doesn't uh, happen with one or two mammograms, or you know. And ultrasound definitely is pretty much safe.
It is. Okay. Okay. And what about heredity here? Does heredity also play a role in endometrial cancer?
Yeah, yeah. Endometrial cancer can be part of a hereditary syndrome as well.
Okay. Understood. And what about, so like we discussed about the financial, side of things when you go for these tests. I know you mentioned it's only just the ultrasound that is generally required. Uh, but is there anything else which, when your symptoms are too severe or post the ultrasound, if there are certain signs of some malignancies present, are there further tests and screening procedures that are required, and what sort of what is the financial side of things there
Um, you're saying to
to
pick up a
pick
malignant.
up the cancer in your body? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So see, basically everything starts with a biopsy. In the endometrium, it is what we call as a curettage of the endometrium or a pupil biopsy. These are not very
Right.
expensive. I mean, if a clinician
Okay.
is ordering a biopsy, then it's pretty standard procedure and it's not very expensive at all. And if you want to get uh, the next level of imaging done, um, maybe some clinicians would go for an MRI.
Hmm.
I mean, MRI at the maximum may cost around 6,000 or 7,000, depending on where you get it done.
Right.
And we don't do PET CTs routinely left, right, and center for all cancers after they're diagnosed. So yeah, if you're doing a PET CT, the cost in Bangalore probably varies between 14 to 24,000. So,
Got it, got it. And so we've discussed about the screening part of it, the tests that are required, how you could be diagnosed or how you could get these malignancies in your body. What about the treatment aspect? If you could, throw some light there, that what if it has happened? How do you go about it post that?
yeah. So when you when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, so the first step is to see whether it has spread elsewhere or not. So
Okay.
so your clinician would order certain tests to find out whether there is malignancy in any other
Hmm.
part of your body. So that's what we call as metastasis. So
Sorry, doctor, I didn't get that. Your voice
yeah, so
wasn't.
that's what we call as metastasis. So that
Okay.
is cancer spreading from one place to another. So,
Right.
so when we know it has not spread anywhere else, then we can opt for the curative treatment. In breast cancer, we talk of curative treatment.
Okay.
And if the breast lump is very early, that is smaller in size, and there are two options. We offer breast conservation surgery or a
Hmm.
removal of the entire breast.
Right,
Whether
right.
the lady wants a reconstruction or whether she wants to preserve the breast, or when both
Hmm.
options are available, we give
Right.
both options to her, and it's
Hmm.
her right to choose. And
Hmm.
uh, based on that, we go in for the next line of treatment. Uh,
Right.
so usually, the basic there are three lines of treatment in cancer. One is surgery, the other is chemotherapy, the other is radiotherapy. So
Okay.
everything revolves around these three things.
Right.
So
And
yeah,
yeah.
so when we want to, there are certain situations where we give chemotherapy first, try to shrink the lump, then operate
Hmm.
after 6 months. There are certain situations where we do the surgery first, then give chemotherapy afterwards, and maybe follow it up with radiation based on the histopathology report. But if a
Right.
lady is undergoing breast conservation, radiation is mandatory to the remaining breast.
Okay. Okay. And what if the cancer has spread to other areas?
So yeah, then again in breast we have certain special tests which we do even whether it has spread or not, which we call as the hormone receptors. That is
Right.
estrogen, progesterone, and there's another receptor called HER2, which
Hmm.
is for targeted therapy. And there's another marker called Ki67, which we do to know the proliferative index. So
Hmm.
based on these factors, uh, the interplay of the treatment starts. So,
Okay.
uh, which drug to start with? If the patient is strong ERPR positive, what we call as hormone receptor positive, they definitely require hormonal therapy.
Okay.
So, they'll be started on tablets. Usually, these tablets we give for 5 years, 7 years,
Hmm.
one tablet a day. Chemotherapy is usually given based on the dose. So, what the patient can tolerate. So based on that, 6 cycles of chemotherapy or 3 cycles of chemotherapy or weekly 12 cycles of chemotherapy.
Hmm.
So that's how the treatment would start.
Got it. So it depends on what has exactly, what has the cancer affected, and obviously there's a whole range, I mean, a whole discussion that we can have there.
Right.
What about endometrial cancer? What is the line of treatment that is
Yeah.
followed there?
So again, endometrium, its primary treatment is surgery.
Hmm.
A good surgery will also not only stage the disease thoroughly, because we wouldn't know what the lymph nodal status is and what subtype of endometrial cancer is uh,
Right.
underlying. So what we call as a radical hysterectomy, that is removal of the uterus along with both the fallopian tubes, ovaries, and the lymph nodes associated. So once we remove all of this and we send it for the pathological examination,
Hmm.
then finally we get a report after 5 to 7 days telling us whether the lymph nodes are involved, not involved, how much thickness of the myometrium. By thickness, I mean the inner lining of the uterus. How
Hmm.
much of the tumor has invaded it? Is it 50% or less than 50% or more than 50%? These are the
Right.
factors which help us influence adding further treatment, like whether the patient will require further radiotherapy or not. So whether
Right.
the lymph nodes being involved, not involved, patients require chemotherapy or not. So once the final report comes, then we know what exact stage it is and whether we add these two modalities or not. If it is
Right.
early stage, no, nothing needs to be done. That's it. End of story. One good surgery with the clearance, it's done.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay. So removal is the, I
it's the
mean,
way.
best
Yeah,
line or the first line of
yeah.
treatment. Understood. So we'll soon take up questions, but if we could slightly touch upon the concept of cervix cancer also before we take up the questions that are here. I
Sure.
think that would be great. So
Yeah.
if you could share some information there about what exactly is this type of cancer, and
So,
how do you test it, how often or how regularly should you go for pap smears?
so yeah, cancer of the cervix is, uh, I mean, cervix is an organ or what you call part of an organ, part of the uterus, the lower part of the uterus.
Right.
So that's where the cervix sort of anatomically is positioned.
Hmm.
So again, interestingly, uh, it was very common in rural India as well. So the postcoital bleeding would be the most common symptom, and there's a lot of social stigma. People, I mean, of course, white discharge per vaginum and foul-smelling discharge are one of the most common symptoms. So women would never get themselves checked for this. So cervix, they would come in such advanced stages. I mean, if you pick up cervix early, it's potentially curable. You can actually cure it. So that's where the concept of screening, because it's accessible, you can get a pap smear done. So
Right.
a simple pap smear, like you take a swab on the cervix and send it for a cytological test, and you will very well know whether there's a, even if there's not a growth, you will know whether there's underlying change in the cells. So that's how early it should be actually picked up.
Okay.
So women who are aged 21 to 21, 29, or in the third decade basically,
Hmm.
should have a pap alone at least every 3 to 5 years, and
Sorry, 3 to 5 years.
years
Okay.
intervals of 3 to 5 years,
Right.
and
Right.
from the third to the sixth or the seventh decade, they should
Hmm.
have a pap test and a HPV, what we call as a co-testing. There's a certain virus, what we call as the human papilloma virus,
Hmm.
every 5 years.
Okay. And what is the process like? Like, what exactly does I mean
Pap
happens?
smear, it's you get a internal pelvic examination done,
Okay.
and then just there's a swab, like a cotton bud, and you have to pass it in, and it's mounted on a stick, and certain cells are scraped off, and that is taken in.
Right.
And there's a
Got
brush
it.
as well, what we call as a cyto brush.
Got
So
it.
yeah,
Okay. So, and what is the line of treatment here for cervix cancer?
again, if it's early disease, surgery is the way forward.
Hmm.
And The other option is radiation,
Okay.
surgery or radiation in very early cancers, but surgery is the preferred modality. Once it is locally advanced, then there's no other option but to go for radiation and chemotherapy.
So all these cancers basically are definitely treatable if identified well in time, and
Yes,
you
early
know
detection practically cures.
is definitely advisable. Got it. And I think that's the awareness that at least I think have been has been lacking, right?
Yeah,
People don't identify those signs, and since they don't, it probably just it leads to a point where it's more difficult to treat it.
yeah,
So yeah, I think the whole debate, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole debate around the whole conversation about around these cancers is pretty much about testing, screening on a regular basis, which is lacking in India.
yes.
Yeah,
I mean, there are programs. I mean, people need to come out and get themselves tested. They
right.
have to be more open for. Yeah, most of the times you might it will be negative. I mean, it's a good thing it's negative, but people are like hard pressed for time. Busy schedules, loss of pay, work. People
Right,
rather go watch a movie for the same money than go and get a pap smear done or a
right.
mammogram, right?
Do you think it's also cultural taboo because of which people don't really pay attention to these
Yeah,
signs?
so visiting, let's say, cancer itself has a big social stigma in our country.
Mm,
So,
yeah,
I mean, I get a lot of patients saying, "Doctor, we like to visit you, but probably in a clinic or we don't want to visit you in the hospital or in some sort of discreet place, like we don't want to be coming to a hospital which is branded to be treating only cancer." But
yeah.
slowly the outlook is changing. But
Hmm.
we have a long way to go, of course. I mean,
Yeah,
but yeah, definitely, uh,
yeah.
it's
I
better.
think it's also the fear of what if you are diagnosed? How do you even tell people about having cancers of all these organs that you generally do not
Yeah.
even address?
So unfortunately, in India, health is not a private issue.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody
True.
want you probably talk to
Everybody
your
wants.
neighbors, you talk to your friends, you want everybody wants to talk about somebody else's health issue.
Right.
So as opposed to the West, where I mean, maybe there are less people to talk to, so people don't talk much, and
Right.
yeah, so that whole what you call as social isolation
Hmm.
and mental stress that comes along with the diagnosis is a huge challenge for us to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the reason it's so important to have these dialogues and conversations on public platforms, right? The more people hear about these things and understand that it's nothing to be ashamed of, the
Yeah,
more they will start caring for their health.
absolutely. I mean, I really congratulate you on taking up this initiative and getting the message out there. I mean, it's really wonderful to see people like you coming out and doing such good work.
Thank you so much, and we're really glad we could have you on our platform sharing so much information. So I think we have about 4 to 5 questions here, so maybe we could quickly take up these questions.
Sure,
So the first, sorry,
sure, sure. Yeah,
yeah,
let's
yeah.
go for it.
So the first question says, what are the top three lifestyle changes you recommend for young women to sort of avoid the higher incidence of
So,
these cancers?
lifestyle changes recommended are eat green, leafy vegetables, healthy food, avoid the fast food diet, you know, yeah, exercise well, have a proper sleep cycle if
Right.
life permits you to have one. Yeah,
Right. So, I think we didn't really touch upon this topic, but very curious to know, does lifestyle improvement actually lessen your chances of being prone to these cancers that we
yeah,
discussed about?
there are a lot of studies which have come up which are giving the answer as yes. So people have started integrating yoga into many of the recovery programs so that that becomes part of the lifestyle as well. So yeah,
Right.
I think there's a lot of work to be done there. But yeah, definitely no smoking, no alcohol. I'm not and no red meat. I mean, these are all proven lifestyle changes which have Uh, I mean, if you compared the incidence of cancer
Hmm.
in the West maybe 40 years ago as opposed to India, I believe it was less.
Right.
So, with the easiest way to correlate now is probably we have moved on to more of a Western diet, Western lifestyle,
Hmm.
and all of that. Yeah. So, probably that's where all this is coming from.
Right. So lifestyle definitely has a role to play. Very interesting question here. Do microwaves cause cancer?
Yeah. Theoretically, yes, but it depends on the dose.
Depends on the sorry.
There's a dose of radiation which comes out of it, right?
Right.
So it's not like you're going to be exposed to a blast of radiation by a small microwave oven.
Right.
I assume that's where it's coming from because we use microwave ovens every day for
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
food. But yeah, it's a yes and no. It's not like it's not a straightforward answer for this.
Okay, okay. Because I think all too often, even at like personally, I probably would have heard this statement coming from my mother. Do not use microwaves too much. Heat your food on the stove if you can. So yeah, I mean, so there's no direct hardcore link to
Yeah,
microwaves and cancer.
yeah. I
It's
mean,
it
if there was by now, I'm sure microwave ovens would have been banned across the world.
true that. Next question is it true that wearing a black bra in the scorching heat increases the chances of cancer?
Uh, See, I think this message was circulating on WhatsApp for the last 4 or 5 years, if I'm not wrong. I have not come across any scientific evidence for this, but I don't know how it's originated. Yeah.
Right, right. Wow. Yeah, this is another statement I've heard too often. So yeah, glad to know there's no link there. One last question that we have here is: does absence of periods increase the chances of ovarian or endometrial cancer?
By absence, do you mean cessation of menses, or that's when a woman attains menopause?
So I think both cases. One is when a woman attains menopause.
Yeah,
The other case is, I mean, especially because we deal with so many women with PCOS, right?
yeah,
So there are so many women who just don't get their period for months or years.
yeah. So definitely yes, definitely yes. Postmenopausal women are at a higher risk, uh,
Hmm.
no doubt about it. And
Right.
like I said, the irregular cycles which happen in PCOS,
Hmm.
there's a big hormonal interplay happening uh,
Right.
on the endometrium. So definitely a attributable risk with a possibility of developing a malignancy at
Right.
some time.
So
Yeah,
it is definitely. I mean, if somebody is sort of ignoring this
yeah. Please
situation,
don't ignore it. Yeah, please don't.
hmm, right. Okay, so I think that those are the questions for today. To end the session, I would request you to leave us with three pieces of advice that you would. Okay, we have one more question coming up, then we can
Sure,
move to
sure.
the last segment. Um, Recovered uterus cancer trigger after menopause. I'm not too sure. Nutan, can
It,
you just clarify that question a little? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
probably, yeah. I mean, postmenopausal endometrial cancer is known. I mean, it is very common. I don't.
Sorry, it is very.
Oh, she's probably asking about recurrence.
Yeah, I think she means if any there are people who recover from uterus cancer trigger after menopause. Yeah, the reoccurrence, right?
Yeah, the recurrence can happen depending on the stage at which it was diagnosed. So there's a percentage risk of recurrence based on each stage at which the cancer gets diagnosed. So the
So,
earlier it's diagnosed, the risk of recurrence is less.
okay, but the chances of reoccurrence is definitely there.
Yeah, yeah.
Understood, understood. I hope that answers your question, Nutan. Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
Great. So, yeah, so if we could have any three pieces of advice that you would like to say to women of every age group to sort of prevent themselves or protect themselves from these situations as much as possible.
Sure. Primarily, yes, self-breast examination, huge role in picking up early breast lumps and practically curing the disease. So please don't forget your monthly self breast examination. Second, lifestyle changes. exercise, diet, and smoking. I mean, these three things are central to today's day and age. Third, don't feel shy to visit a doctor. Please, at the drop of a hat, please go and visit someone and talk to them about the symptoms. Even though you feel it is silly, or if your neighbor or your friend feels it is silly, don't ignore it. If it's troubling you, please go and visit someone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for answering so many questions of ours today, being with us on this platform. We hope to talk to you soon. I hope to have many such conversations with you in the future as well.
Sure.
And thank you to
My
everybody
pleasure.
who joined us today. Sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to everybody who joined us today, had such amazing questions. There's somebody who says, thanks for wonderful session. So, yeah, I mean, thanks to everybody for being present today. We can end the session now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor.